And then on the horizontal axis are the things that will need to change. The technology will need to be developed, and we will need to see behavioural and structural change across our economies. If we just look at one individual bubble in this chart and focus on that, we may get a very good climate change agreement in Copenhagen, we may not. That's not going to be enough unless it drives these other areas, unless it drives the technology, the development of economic instruments, the behavioural and structural change. We will need action in all these areas. I'm just going to talk very briefly about technology, which I know is a big focus of this session, and on economic instruments, before I just briefly conclude. To set the scene, however, I want to start with this quote from Adam Smith in the 18th century. I'm an economist, so obviously Adam Smith is an important figure in the development of economic thought. One of the big challenges in his day was that people didn't have enough to eat. And he pointed out it's not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest. It was incentives, people pursuing their own economic interest, that actually helped deliver the food that was needed in 18th century Britain. It's going to be through those incentives and through people's regard to their own economic interest that I think we're going to move to a low-carbon society. We're not going to drag people screaming and kicking. We've got to create the notion that this is the direction that is in our interest to go. That's partly through a better understanding of the issue, but it's also going to be through the development of various policies and instruments which will make it in people's interest to move in this direction. One of those has got to be influencing the technology. I've already talked quite a bit about technology. Low carbon technologies of a whole range of different sorts, whether we're talking applied in the energy sector, in the transport sector, we've heard mention of smart meters, enabling technologies like that, are all going to be part of the mechanism through which we will move in the direction of a low carbon society. How will these technologies be developed? An important thing about technology is that it is a time process that takes time for technologies to be developed and embodied. And therefore, this is probably one of the more urgent tasks. If you look at the high technology industries like information technology, consumer demand, the need to satisfy a fast-moving consumer, is one of the key elements. I don't think the green consumer has yet been energized to a great extent in terms of driving that consumer demand, but that is an important potential lever. I think what we are seeing at the moment is strategic vision from businesses of identifying that the low-carbon society is a society of the future, and that is the motivating factor, I believe, behind a lot of business thinking on how they might move forward and develop technology. I think it'll be interesting to see how that comes out in the presentations today. And there are potential economic and other instruments. Carbon pricing may have an effect, though obviously carbon pricing has to have there has to be confidence that it will be applied into the future, and there will be some notion of what future carbon prices will be if it's going to affect technology, which is a long-term process. Regulation and standards are being applied in various areas, and other government policies and financial supports. But we also face a situation that at the moment there are quite a few barriers, and I think as well as creating the incentives, we're going to need to break down these barriers. There's a lot of consumer confusion. There are in some sectors conflicting business strategies. It's not clear often if you look at an individual sector where the solutions are going to lie. There are inadequate long-term price signals coming out of the current carbon pricing developments. Regulation is quite uncertain and uneven, and there are unclear or inconsistent policy approaches in other ways. So tackling these barriers is just as important as creating the positives and incentives. What can we say about economic instruments? My main point here will be to say that we're going to have to deploy a wide range of economic instruments to change behaviour and business strategies in this area, I believe. There's been a lot of focus on emissions trading, but emissions trading is not a single silver bullet. It's not necessarily applicable for all sectors, and it will take time for the markets to develop at such a mature level so that emissions trading will drive the right time signals. So we will need to think about other economic instruments, carbon taxes, possibly energy taxes, direct incentives for developing and embodying low carbon technologies, and energy efficiency incentives. It's tempting to think of economic instruments as a bit of a downside. It's increasing cost, but there is also potential economic activity from the development of these markets. Here is an estimate from the Stern Review of the potential size of the carbon markets. The lowest yellow, the yellow bar, not the orange one, is the current size of what we're doing in the EU ETS. And the height of the right-hand bar is perhaps the potential if we engage the top 20 global emitters and bring in as many activities as possible. There is a lot of potential in carbon markets. I will move quite quickly over these two slides. I don't want to eat into the time for other speakers, but one issue with emissions trading is the key conditions that will make it necessary: comprehensive geographical coverage, wide sectoral coverage, long-term frameworks, robust monitoring important, strong institutions, are not yet reflected in practice in the way emissions trading is developing. We've got a scheme working in Europe, but its sector coverage is limited, prices have been volatile, it's been subject to some political pressures and influences. There's a joke about economists where an economist comes up with a solution to open a can of beans and says, assume we have a can opener. We have to be very careful about assuming we have a very well-functioning, comprehensive carbon trading system when it doesn't yet develop. It will take time for that to develop and influence behaviour. So our chairman is looking at me, so I'm going to very quickly move to my last two slides, which hopefully will set the scene for some of the other presentations later. Just to sum up the key steps that I've identified to a low-carbon society. Two particular tracks: a major shift in energy efficiency while decarbonising energy and transport. That will require a massive expansion of a low zero-carbon electricity supply using a wide range of technologies. It will also require, in my view, electrification of road transport alongside increasing use of biofuels. And heavy investment in low-carbon technologies will be required, and the business community will have to be a major part of that investment. And a wide range of economic and regulatory instruments will need to be developed to achieve the sort of changes I've been talking about. But this is not just about a downside of something we've got to do. There are major business opportunities. I think for many businesses they identify now there is a strategic driver that there is no alternative to some form of low-carbon society in the future. And the challenge is to work out what that means for your business and for your sector. There are key energy and transport sector challenges in terms of technology, infrastructure, systems and support. It's not all about the hard equipment, but technology will be a key driver. And there's also other, what I would say, perhaps more service sector type activities. We mustn't forget that the service sector in the UK is about 70% of our economy. And here are some of the things in 2, 3, 4, 5 where the service sector can also contribute: helping to deliver energy efficiency, developing a market infrastructure for carbon trading, pricing and decision making, supporting policymakers in developing the tools, educating, informing and advising the public and the business community on the low carbon society change agenda. So there's a wide range of activities. I hope we'll hear more about them both in the presentations today and in your discussions. I hope that sets the scene for what I'm hoping will be a very stimulating and productive day. Thank you very much.